In a world that constantly bombards us with the message to prioritize ourselves, to chase individual success, and to be the hero of our own story, it might sound counterintuitive, even radical, to suggest we think of ourselves less. Yet, if we examine this idea closely, we'll discover a profound truth. It is not in obsessively elevating ourselves that we find fulfillment, but in stepping back, understanding our place in the broader tapestry of life, and serving something greater than our own ego. When we think less of ourselves, it doesn't mean we devalue who we are, quite the opposite. It means we stop centering everything around our desires, fears, and ambitions. It's about recognizing that the world doesn't revolve around us, and that liberation comes when we stop trying to make it do so. Imagine a world where everyone is fixated solely on themselves. Relationships erode, communities crumble, and purpose evaporates. Thinking less of yourself doesn't mean you neglect yourself. It means that your energy and focus are directed outward, to people, causes, and truths that transcend your own immediate needs. When you think of yourself less, you make room for growth. You see feedback not as an attack on your identity, but as an opportunity to improve. You don't cling to your pride, but embrace humility. This humility allows you to learn, adapt, and even fail without being crushed under the weight of self-centered expectations. Moreover, when you're not consumed with your own you become more present for others. You listen without the need to interject your story. You empathize without comparing. You contribute without demanding recognition. This outward orientation is what fosters real connection and gives life its richest meaning. Thinking of yourself less also aligns you with responsibility. Responsibility is not about what benefits you directly, but about doing what is right, even if it's uncomfortable or inconvenient. And in fulfilling responsibility, you find purpose. Purpose is never born from self-absorption. It arises when you give yourself to something greater, your family, your work, your community, or even a cause that might not reward you in tangible ways. The paradox here is worth noting. When you think of yourself less, you often find more of yourself. You find resilience, depth, and character. The parts of you that are most valuable to the world emerge only when you stop making yourself the center of it. In today's world, we are constantly told to focus on ourselves, to prioritize our goals, our feelings, and our personal satisfaction above all else. This advice often feels empowering at first. It gives us the sense that we are the masters of our destiny, fully in control of our lives and the outcomes we desire. But while this message resonates with our instinct for self-preservation, it often leads us down a path of isolation and emptiness. A life that revolves solely around ourselves becomes narrow, unsatisfying, and disconnected from the richness of the world around us. The truth is, when we make ourselves the focal point of everything, we limit our capacity to engage deep with life. Our relationships, for instance, suffer when our attention is inwardly focused. Imagine speaking with someone who is only waiting for their turn to talk, or a friend who always measures the value of a conversation, how much of their own story they can share. When we approach life with a self-centered mindset, we lose the ability to truly listen and connect. Instead of seeing others as unique individuals with their own struggles and stories, we view them as mere participants in our narrative, there to validate us or help us achieve our goals. Thinking less of yourself doesn't mean you disregard your needs, nor does it mean you lack confidence or ambition. It means recognizing that your life is not the center of the universe. This shift in perspective is profoundly liberating. It allows you to see the world for what it is, a vast, interconnected web of people, experiences, and opportunities that are far more beautiful and complex than anything that could be confined to your own personal concerns. When you think less of yourself, you free up mental space to focus on things that truly matter, the people you love, the causes you care about, and the work that gives your life meaning. By stepping back from the self, you also begin to notice the immense value of others. You start to see their strengths, their wisdom, and their potential in ways that might have been obscured before. This shift in focus allows you to foster deeper, more meaningful connections. Instead of engaging with others based on what they can offer you, you begin to appreciate them simply for who they are. Relationships built on this foundation are not only more fulfilling, but also more enduring. They are not transactional or contingent on how well someone serves your needs. Rather, they are rooted in mutual respect, understanding, and genuine care. Moreover, thinking of yourself less can profoundly affect how you contribute to the world. When you are no longer fixated on your own desires, fears, or ambitions, you can channel your energy into something greater. You might find yourself drawn to work that benefits others, whether through community service, creative expression, or simply being a source of support and encouragement to those around you. 2. This outward focus often brings a sense of purpose and satisfaction that is impossible to achieve through self-centered pursuits alone. As a social entrepreneur, I've always been obsessed with becoming rich, just automatically, but then I really reframed that process. A self-seeker's life also tends to amplify dissatisfaction. When we center our attention on ourselves, we become hyper-aware of our flaws, disappointments, and unmet expectations. This constant scrutiny creates a cycle of self-doubt and insecurity, leaving us perpetually dissatisfied with who we are and what we have. In contrast, thinking less of yourself allows you to break free from this cycle. By directing your attention outward, you naturally become less preoccupied with your shortcomings. You stop measuring your worth by impossible standards and start appreciating the world as it is, a complex and imperfect place, but one full of beauty and possibility. In thinking less of yourself, you cultivate gratitude. You begin to notice the countless ways in which others contribute to your life, often in ways you might have overlooked before. This gratitude, in turn, fosters a sense of humility, a recognition that no one achieves anything alone. It reminds you that your success, happiness, and even your survival depend on the support and efforts of countless others. This realization is not humbling in a way that diminishes your worth, but rather in a way that enriches your understanding of the interconnectedness of life. Humility is a concept that is often misunderstood in modern culture. Many people equate it with weakness, passivity, or a lack of self-confidence, but in reality, humility is a cornerstone of personal growth and transformation. It is the recognition that we are imperfect, fallible, and always capable of learning and improving. When we adopt a posture of humility, we create the conditions necessary for genuine growth, because we stop resisting the reality of our limitations and start seeing them as opportunities to evolve into better versions of ourselves. One of the greatest obstacles to growth is the human tendency to cling to pride. Pride tells us that admitting we don't know something is a sign of failure. It convinces us that seeking help is a weakness and that acknowledging mistakes diminishes our worth. But pride, when left unchecked, becomes a prison. It keeps us locked in patterns of stagnation because it forces us to maintain an illusion of perfection that is neither realistic nor sustainable. Pride can make us defensive, resistant to criticism, and unwilling to accept new ideas or perspectives, all of which are essential for growth. Humility, on the other hand, is liberating. It allows us to embrace feedback without feeling personally attacked. Instead of viewing criticism as a threat to our identity, we can see it for what it truly is, a valuable tool for self-improvement. Humility shifts the focus from defending our current selves to becoming curious about who we can become. When we stop fearing failure and start seeing it as a natural part of the learning process, we open ourselves to possibilities that were previously out of reach. An essential component of humility is the willingness to be wrong. This is not easy, as admitting we are wrong can feel like a loss of control or a blow to our ego. However, acknowledging our mistakes is one of the most powerful steps we can take toward growth. When we admit we are wrong, we free ourselves from the need to justify flawed actions or ideas. We stop wasting energy on defending the indefensible and instead direct that energy toward finding solutions and making meaningful changes. Humility also fosters a mindset of lifelong learning. A humble person understands that no matter how much they know, there is always more to discover. This mindset encourages curiosity and openness, qualities that are essential for navigating a world that is constantly changing. When we approach life with humility, we become students of our experiences, seeking lessons in every challenge, setback, or success. This perspective transforms obstacles into opportunities and turns even the most difficult moments into stepping stones toward growth. Another important aspect of humility is its impact on relationships. When we think too highly of ourselves, we often place ourselves above others, consciously or unconsciously. This can lead to arrogance, entitlement, and a lack of empathy, qualities that push people away and weaken connections. Humility, by contrast, allows us to approach others with respect and understanding. It helps us to listen without judgment, to value the perspectives of others, and to build trust. In doing so, humility not only strengthens relationships, but also creates an environment in which mutual growth can thrive. In the absence of humility, we risk becoming rigid and unyielding. We may cling to outdated beliefs or ineffective practices simply because they are familiar or because admitting they are flawed feels too uncomfortable. Humility, however, invites flexibility. It allows us to adapt and change when faced with new evidence or better ways of thinking. This adaptability is crucial in a world that is dynamic and ever-evolving. A rigid mindset leads to irrelevance, but a humble one ensures we remain responsive and resilient. Perhaps most importantly, humility reminds us that we are not the ultimate authority on all things. It teaches us to seek guidance, whether from mentors, peers, or even those who have walked entirely different paths than our own. By acknowledging the limits of our knowledge and experience, we can draw on the collective wisdom of others. This not only accelerates our growth, but also enriches our understanding of the world. In humility, we find the courage to ask questions, the grace to accept help, and the strength to admit that we are a work in progress. The idea of letting go of the ego can feel unsettling at first. We've been conditioned to believe that our self-possession is central to our identity, and that projecting confidence, control, and competence is essential to success. But the more tightly we cling to our ego, the more we restrict ourselves. Ego convinces us that the world must conform to our desires, that we must always win, and that our self-worth is tied to external validation. It becomes a heavy burden, demanding constant attention, reinforcement, and protection. True liberation comes not from indulging the ego, but from stepping away from it, letting go of the incessant need to center ourselves in everything. When we let go of the ego, we free ourselves from the exhausting pursuit of perfection. Ego often whispers that we must never fail, never show weakness, and never admit ignorance. But this obsession with appearing flawless is a recipe for stress and burnout. It traps us in a cycle of constantly trying to prove ourselves to others, whether through career achievement, social status, or personal accomplishments. Letting go of the ego means recognizing that our worth is not tied to how others perceive us. It allows us to embrace imperfection as an inherent part of being human, and to stop wasting energy on maintaining a facade of invulnerability. Ego also fuels comparison. It urges us to measure our success, happiness, and value against those around us. This leads to feelings of inadequacy when we perceive ourselves as falling short, or to arrogance when we believe we're ahead. Either way, comparison poisons our ability to live authentically and appreciate the unique path we're on. When we let go of ego, we stop defining ourselves by how we stack up against others. Instead, we begin to focus on our individual growth and the goals that truly matter to us, independent of external metrics. Another way ego holds us back is by making us overly defensive. When someone challenges our ideas, offers criticism, or points out a mistake, the ego reacts with resistance. It interprets these moments as personal attacks rather than opportunities to learn and grow. This defensiveness stunts our development and alienates those who might otherwise help us improve. By letting go of ego, we can approach such moments with curiosity rather than hostility. We can separate our sense of self from the ideas we hold or the work we produce, recognizing that growth often requires us to acknowledge where we've gone wrong. Letting go of the ego also deepens our relationships with others. Ego-driven interactions are often transactional, focused on what we can gain or how we can appear. This creates barriers to genuine connection, as people sense when we're more concerned with ourselves than with them. By releasing the ego, we become more present in our relationships. We listen not to respond or impress, but to understand. We empathize without judgment and show up for others without expecting anything in return. This creates trust, intimacy, and a sense of belonging that ego-driven behavior can never achieve. Moreover, letting go of ego shifts our priorities from self-serving goals to those that benefit the larger community. Ego often focuses on individual success at the expense of collective well-being. It seeks recognition, status, and power, often ignoring the impact these pursuits have on others. When we let go of the ego, we start to see ourselves as part of something bigger. We recognize that our actions have ripple effects and that contributing to the greater good can be far more fulfilling than chasing personal accolades. This shift not only enriches our lives, but also creates a positive impact on the world around us. Letting go of the ego also helps us cultivate resilience. When the ego is in control, setbacks can feel catastrophic. Losing a job, facing rejection, or encountering failure can feel like an existential threat because the ego interprets these events as attacks on our identity. But when we let go of ego, we realize that failure doesn't define us. It becomes a stepping stone rather than a stumbling block. Without the ego's constant need for validation, we can navigate life's ups and downs with greater ease, learning from challenges rather than being overwhelmed by them. Finally, letting go of the ego allows us to experience life more fully. Ego often keeps us trapped in a constant narrative, replaying the past or imagining the future in ways that revolve around ourselves. This pulls us out of the present moment where life truly unfolds. When we release the ego, we become more attuned to the world around us, the beauty of nature, the joy of simple moments, and the richness of human connection. We stop trying to control everything and instead allow ourselves to simply be, appreciating life as it is rather than as we think it should be. True connection with others is one of the most rewarding aspects of life, yet it is also one of the most challenging to achieve. This is because authentic connection requires us to move beyond our self-centered instincts and cultivate a presence that is fully engaged with the people around us. When we are consumed with thoughts about ourselves, our achievements, our problems, or how others perceive us, we inadvertently build walls between ourselves and others. These walls prevent us from truly understanding and empathizing with the people in our lives. Real connection can only happen when we shift our focus outward and embrace a genuine interest in others. Self-centeredness creates a barrier to meaningful relationships because it prioritizes our own perspective at the expense of understanding someone else's. When we constantly think about how a conversation reflects on us, whether we're being impressive enough or how we can redirect the focus back to our own story, we rob the interaction of its depth. People can sense when our attention is divided, and it leaves them feeling unimportant or unheard. This diminishes trust and weakens the bond we could have built. By thinking less about ourselves and more about the person in front of us, we create space for true dialogue, a space where listening becomes more important than speaking, and understanding takes precedence over being understood. Listening is one of the most powerful tools for connection, yet it is also one of the most underappreciated. Too often, people listen with the intent to reply rather than to comprehend. They are merely waiting for a pause in the conversation to insert their own thoughts or stories, effectively turning the dialogue into a competition for attention. However, when we approach conversations with genuine curiosity and a desire to learn from the other person, something transformative happens. We begin to see the world through their eyes, gaining insights into their experiences, struggles, and values. This act of focused listening fosters a sense of validation and respect that is foundational to meaningful relationships. Empathy is another essential component of real connection, and it is something that cannot coexist with self-centeredness. Empathy requires us to put ourselves in someone else's shoes, to imagine their feelings and experiences without filtering them through our own biases or judgments. This is only possible when we set aside our own concerns and direct our attention outward. Empathy builds bridges of understanding, even in situations where differences in perspective might otherwise lead to conflict. It allows us to approach others with compassion and kindness, qualities that deepen our relationships and create an environment of mutual support. Thinking less about ourselves also helps us contribute to relationships without the expectation of reciprocation or recognition. When we do something for others solely to gain their approval or gratitude, our actions lose their authenticity. True connection arises when we give without ulterior motives, when we offer our time, energy, or kindness simply because we value the other person. These selfless acts create bonds that are rooted in trust and sincerity rather than in the transactional dynamics that self-centeredness often fosters. Another barrier that self-centeredness creates is the tendency to compare ourselves to others. This mindset not only damages our own sense of self-worth, but also prevents us from celebrating the successes and joys of those around us. When we think less about ourselves, we let go of this comparison and replace it with genuine happiness for others. Instead of feeling threatened by their achievements, we can support and uplift them. This shift not only strengthens our relationships, but also creates a positive ripple effect, encouraging others to do the same. Being present is perhaps the most important aspect of connecting with others. Yet it is something many of us struggle with in today's fast-paced world. When we are preoccupied with our own thoughts, distracted by technology, or caught up in worrying about the past or future, we miss out on the richness of the present moment. Presence requires us to fully engage with the here and now, to give our undivided attention to the person in front of us. This simple yet profound act communicates that we value them, that they are worth our time and focus. It is in these moments of undistracted presence that the deepest connections are formed. Letting go of self-centeredness also enables us to approach relationships with vulnerability. When we stop worrying about how we appear to others, we can share our true selves, the parts of us that are imperfect, messy, and human. Vulnerability fosters intimacy because it invites others to do the same. It creates a safe space where people feel comfortable being themselves without fear of judgment or rejection. This authenticity strengthens relationships and allows them to withstand challenges and grow over time. Ultimately, thinking less of ourselves is not about neglecting our own needs, but about recognizing that relationships thrive when we prioritize connection over self-interest. When we listen attentively, empathize genuinely, and show up for others with presence and vulnerability, we create bonds that enrich our lives and the lives of those around us. Gratitude is one of the most transformative attitudes a person can cultivate. It shifts our focus from what we lack to what we already have, grounding us in an awareness of life's abundance. But gratitude cannot coexist with an inflated sense of entitlement or an ego-driven perspective that insists the world owes us something. When we think less about ourselves, we become more attuned to the countless gifts that surround us, gifts we might otherwise take for granted. This shift in focus not only enhances our personal well-being, but also deepens our appreciation for the people, opportunities, and experiences that enrich our lives. One of the most profound effects of gratitude is its ability to counteract dissatisfaction. When we are overly focused on ourselves, it becomes easy to fixate on what we feel is missing. We compare our lives to others, measure our achievements against impossible standards, and constantly look for the next thing that might finally make us happy. This mindset leads to a perpetual state of discontent, as no accomplishment, possession, or relationship ever feels like enough. Gratitude breaks this cycle by redirecting our attention to what we already have. It reminds us that even in challenging times, there are reasons to be thankful. Whether it's the support of loved ones, the beauty of nature, or the simple fact that we are alive. Thinking less about ourselves also allows us to recognize the contributions of others. When we are preoccupied with our own concerns, we often overlook the countless ways in which other people make our lives better. From the friend who listens without judgment to the stranger whose work goes unnoticed but essential, the world is full of people whose efforts sustain and support us. Gratitude helps us see these contributions clearly, fostering a sense of humility and interconnectedness. It reminds us that none of us achieves anything entirely on our own, and that every success is built on a foundation of collective effort. Practicing gratitude also strengthens our relationships. When we express genuine appreciation for others, we deepen the bonds of trust and mutual respect. Gratitude encourages us to acknowledge not only the big gestures, but also the small, everyday acts of kindness that often go unnoticed. A simple thank you can carry enormous weight, affirming the value of someone's efforts and reinforcing the connection between you. This acknowledgement creates a positive feedback loop, as people who feel appreciated are more likely to extend kindness and generosity in return. Moreover, gratitude fosters resilience. Life is filled with challenges, setbacks, and disappointments, and it's easy to become consumed by negativity when things don't go as planned. However, gratitude provides a powerful antidote to despair. By focusing on what we still have, rather than what we've lost, we cultivate a sense of perspective that helps us navigate difficult times. This doesn't mean ignoring pain or pretending everything is fine, but rather finding moments of light, even in the darkness. Gratitude allows us to see the full picture, not just the struggles, but also the strengths and resources that help us endure. Another benefit of gratitude is its ability to enhance our overall sense of well-being. Research has shown that people who regularly practice gratitude experience greater happiness, reduce stress, and improve physical health. This is because gratitude shifts our mindset from scarcity to abundance. It encourages us to savor the present moment rather than constantly striving for more. By appreciating what we have, we create a sense of fulfillment that is not dependent on external circumstances, but rooted in our internal perspective. Gratitude also helps us reframe our ambitions and goals. When we are overly self-centered, we often pursue achievements for the sake of recognition or validation. This can lead to a hollow kind of success, one that feels empty despite outward appearances. Gratitude, however, grounds our ambitions in a sense of purpose. It helps us align our goals with values that extend beyond ourselves, allowing us to work toward things that truly matter. Instead of chasing accomplishments to prove our worth, we begin to see our efforts as contributions to something larger, a way of giving back to the people and communities that have supported us. Letting go of self-centeredness also enables us to see challenges as opportunities for growth. When we are consumed by ego, setbacks often feel like personal failures, and we may struggle to move forward. Gratitude, however, allows us to view challenges through a different lens. It reminds us to be thankful for the lessons they bring, even when they are difficult. This perspective helps us build resilience and approach obstacles with a sense of curiosity and determination rather than defeat. Finally, gratitude cultivates a sense of wonder. When we think less about ourselves, we become more attuned to the beauty and complexity of the world around us. The morning sunlight streaming through a window, the laughter of a child, the quiet strength of a loved one. These moments often go unnoticed when we are absorbed in our own concerns. Gratitude helps us pause and appreciate the richness of life in all its forms, fostering a deeper connection to the world and to the people who make it meaningful. One of the most liberating realizations in life is that not everything is about us. When we view the world primarily through the lens of how it affects us personally, we inevitably narrow our perspective and lose sight of the vast interconnectedness of life. Thinking less about ourselves allows us to see situations and experiences with greater clarity, because it removes the distortions created by our ego. It invites us to approach life with curiosity and openness rather than defensiveness or self-interest. This shift in focus is transformative because it helps us understand that the world is not just a backdrop to our personal story. It is a complex, shared reality where every individual plays a part. When we are overly self-centered, we tend to take things personally. A friend's short response, a colleague's critique, or even a stranger's bad mood can feel like an attack on our character or worth. This perspective not only causes unnecessary emotional distress, but also leads us to misinterpret situations and relationships. By thinking less about ourselves, we can step back and see events for what they truly are, often neutral or unrelated to us. This broader view allows us to respond with grace rather than reacting impulsively. We come to understand that most people's actions are shaped by their own experiences and challenges, not by an intent to harm or slight us. Shifting our focus away from ourselves also enhances our ability to solve problems. When we are preoccupied with how a situation affects us personally, we often become trapped in a cycle of worry or frustration. This emotional fog makes it difficult to think clearly and address the issue effectively. By detaching from our self-centered perspective, we can approach problems with a calm and objective mindset. We can analyze the situation without being clouded by fear or insecurity, enabling us to find solutions that are practical and constructive. This detachment doesn't mean ignoring our feelings. Rather, it means not letting those feelings control us or distort our perception. Thinking less about ourselves also allows us to become more adaptable. Life is full of unexpected changes and challenges, and rigidity in the face of these disruptions often leads to stress and disappointment. When we are overly focused on ourselves, we may resist change because it threatens our sense of control or disrupts our plans. However, when we adopt a broader perspective, we become more open to the natural flow of life. We begin to see change not as a threat, but as an opportunity to grow and learn. This adaptability makes us more resilient, enabling us to navigate life's uncertainties with confidence and grace. Another benefit of broadening our perspective is that it fosters a sense of interconnectedness. When we stop centering ourselves in every situation, we begin to see the roles that others play and the ways in which our actions impact the collective. This awareness deepens our understanding of the shared human experience. It helps us recognize that our struggles, joys, and aspirations are not unique, but are part of a larger tapestry of life. This interconnectedness can be profoundly humbling and inspiring, reminding us that we are both small in the grand scheme of things and deeply connected to something much larger than ourselves. Thinking less about ourselves also enhances our capacity for empathy. When we are consumed by our own thoughts and feelings, it is difficult to fully understand or appreciate the experiences of others. By stepping outside of ourselves, we create space to genuinely listen and connect. We become more attuned to the needs and perspectives of those around us, allowing us to build stronger and more meaningful relationships. This outward focus not only benefits others, but also enriches our own lives by fostering a sense of community and belonging. Furthermore, stepping out of a self-centered mindset helps us manage criticism and failure more effectively. When we are overly attached to our ego, even constructive feedback can feel like a personal attack. This defensiveness prevents us from learning and growing. However, when we think less about ourselves, we can view criticism as an opportunity for improvement rather than a threat to our identity. Similarly, failure becomes less intimidating because we no longer tie our self-worth to our accomplishments. This perspective allows us to take risks, embrace challenges, and view setbacks as valuable lessons rather than insurmountable obstacles. Lastly, thinking less about ourselves enables us to live with greater presence. When we are caught up in our own concerns, whether it's worrying about the future, regretting the past, or overanalyzing how we are perceived, we lose touch with the present moment. This mental preoccupation prevents us from fully experiencing life as it unfolds. By focusing less on ourselves, we can engage more deeply with the world around us. We notice the beauty in small details, the richness of human interactions, and the simple joys of daily life. This presence not only enhances our personal well-being, but also allows us to contribute more meaningfully to the lives of others. One of the most profound effects of thinking less about ourselves is the freedom it brings to live authentically. When we are preoccupied with our self-image, we spend a significant amount of time and energy trying to meet the expectations of others or conform to societal norms. This preoccupation can trap us in a cycle of performance. where our actions are dictated by how we want to be perceived rather than by what we genuinely value. Letting go of this self-centered mindset liberates us from these constraints, allowing us to align our lives with our true purpose and principles. When we are overly focused on ourselves, we often make decisions based on fear. Fear of judgment, fear of failure, or fear of rejection. These fears can lead us to compromise our integrity or pursue paths that don't resonate with our inner values. For instance, we might choose a career because it impresses others, enter relationships to avoid loneliness, or adopt behaviors that are popular rather than meaningful. Over time, these choices create a disconnect between who we are and how we live. Thinking less about ourselves removes the pressure to constantly perform or prove something to others. It allows us to act from a place of authenticity, where our decisions are guided by what truly matters to us rather than by external validation. This shift also reduces the anxiety that comes from trying to control how others perceive us. The truth is, we cannot fully dictate how people view us, no matter how carefully we curate our image. Everyone interprets our actions through the lens of their own experiences, biases, and expectations. When we fixate on managing these perceptions, we set ourselves up for frustration and disappointment. By thinking less about ourselves, we let go of the need to micromanage our image and instead focus on being honest and genuine. This honesty not only feels more liberating, but also resonates more deeply with others. People are drawn to authenticity because it reflects a sense of confidence and self-assurance that is not dependent on approval or applause. Living authentically also requires embracing vulnerability. When we are overly self-centered, we tend to hide our flaws, struggles, and imperfections out of fear that they might make us appear weak or unworthy. However, this perfectionism is both exhausting and isolating. It creates a barrier between ourselves and others, as people cannot truly connect with a facade. Thinking less about ourselves allows us to drop this need for perfection and to accept that being human means being imperfect. Vulnerability becomes a strength rather than a liability because it fosters genuine connections and helps us build deeper, more meaningful relationships. Another way thinking less about ourselves fosters authenticity is by helping us break free from comparison. When we constantly measure our lives against others, we lose sight of our unique path and purpose. Comparison creates envy, self-doubt, and a sense of inadequacy, all of which undermine our ability to live authentically. By focusing less on ourselves, we stop defining our worth in relation to others and start appreciating our individual journey. This shift allows us to celebrate our own achievements and those of others without feeling threatened or diminished. Authenticity also involves aligning our actions with our values. When we are overly self-centered, our priorities often revolve around gaining recognition, status, or power. These pursuits might provide temporary satisfaction, but they rarely lead to a sense of fulfillment or purpose. Thinking less about ourselves helps us identify what truly matters, whether it's cultivating meaningful relationships, contributing to our community, or pursuing a passion that brings us joy. Living in alignment with these values gives our lives a sense of direction and significance that external rewards cannot provide. Moreover, thinking less about ourselves allows us to approach life with humility. Authenticity requires us to acknowledge that we don't have all the answers and that we are constantly learning and evolving. When we let go of the need to appear infallible, we open ourselves up to growth. We become more willing to take risks, admit mistakes, and seek guidance from others. This humility not only helps us grow as individuals, but also foster stronger connections with those around us, as people are more likely to trust and respect someone who is genuine and self-aware. And I know that it might seem odd. Finally, living authentically means embracing the present moment. When we are overly focused on ourselves, we often dwell on past regrets or worry about future outcomes. This mental preoccupation prevents us from fully experiencing and appreciating the here and now. Thinking less about ourselves helps us quiet this inner chatter and become more present in our lives. In this state of presence, we can engage more deeply with the people and experiences that matter most, savoring life's moments, rather than rushing through them in pursuit of an elusive ideal. Thinking less about ourselves allows us to embrace humility, which is essential for personal growth and deep connections with others. Humility is not about diminishing our self-worth or undervaluing our abilities. Rather, it is about recognizing that we are part of something larger than ourselves. It is the awareness that we do not have all the answers, that we are fallible, and that we can always learn from others and from life itself. By adopting this perspective, we create space for growth, collaboration, and meaningful interactions that enrich both our lives and the lives of those around us. One of the most significant ways humility fosters growth is by encouraging us to adopt a mindset of curiosity. When we think too much about ourselves, we often become defensive or closed off, clinging to the belief that we are already right or that admitting ignorance would somehow make us look weak. This ego-driven approach limits our ability to learn and stifles our potential. Humility, on the other hand, invites us to approach the world with an open mind. It allows us to ask questions, seek new perspectives, and embrace the idea that every person and experience has something valuable to teach us. This openness to learning not only expands our knowledge, but also deepens our understanding of the world and our place within it. Humility also helps us navigate criticism and failure in a constructive way. When we are overly self-criticism, criticism often feels like a personal attack, leading to defensiveness or resentment. Similarly, failure can feel like a blow to our self-worth, making it difficult to recover and move forward. By thinking less about ourselves, we can view criticism and failure as opportunities for growth rather than as threats to our identity. Humility allows us to accept feedback with grace, acknowledging that we are not perfect and that there is always room for improvement. This perspective transforms setbacks into stepping stones, enabling us to learn from our mistakes and emerge stronger and more resilient. Another key aspect of humility is the ability to value the contributions of others. When we are consumed by self-centeredness, we often overlook or dismiss the efforts and insights of those around us. This not only isolates us, but also deprives us of the benefits of collaboration and collective wisdom. By thinking less about ourselves, we become more attuned to the strengths and talents of others, recognizing that we are part of a larger community where everyone has something to offer. This perspective fosters teamwork and mutual respect, creating an environment where diverse ideas and skills can come together to achieve greater outcomes than any individual could accomplish alone. Humility also enhances our relationships by fostering empathy and compassion. When we are overly focused on our own needs and desires, it is easy to overlook or misunderstand the experiences of others. Humility helps us set aside our ego and genuinely listen to others, seeking to understand their perspectives and feelings. This deepened sense of empathy strengthens our connections and builds trust, as people feel valued and heard when we approach them with humility. It reminds us that every person we encounter is navigating their own struggles and joys, encouraging us to treat others with kindness and respect. Moreover, humility helps us resist the temptation to compare ourselves to others. In a self-centered mindset, we often measure our worth by how we stack up against those around us, leading to feelings of envy, inadequacy, or superiority. These comparisons create unnecessary tension and distract us from our own path. Humility shifts our focus inward, helping us recognize that our value is not determined by external measures, but by our integrity, character, and growth. This perspective frees us from the burden of comparison and allows us to celebrate both our own progress and the achievements of others without jealousy or judgment. Finally, humility enables us to embrace uncertainty and complexity. Life is rarely black and white, and rigidly holding on to our own views can blind us to the nuances of a situation. When we think less about ourselves, we become more willing to acknowledge that we do not have all the answers and that our perspective is only one among many. This willingness to admit uncertainty fosters intellectual humility, which is crucial for making thoughtful and informed decisions. It allows us to weigh different viewpoints, adapt to new information, and remain open to change. This flexibility not only enhances our personal growth, but also equips us to navigate the complexities of life with wisdom and grace. In embracing humility, we begin to see the world and ourselves more clearly. We recognize that we are not the center of the universe, but rather a small yet significant part of a much larger whole. This perspective fosters gratitude, empathy, and a genuine desire to contribute to the well-being of others. It helps us move through life with a sense of purpose and connection, unburdened by the need to prove ourselves or cling to a false sense of superiority. By thinking less about ourselves and cultivating humility, we unlock the potential for a richer, more meaningful existence. In a world that often encourages self-promotion and constant self-focus, the choice to think less about ourselves is both radical and transformative. It frees us from the weight of excessive ego, liberates us from the endless pursuit of validation, and redirects our attention toward what truly matters: our relationships, our growth, and our contribution to something greater than ourselves. By adopting a mindset of humility, gratitude, and empathy, we not only cultivate inner peace, but also create a ripple effect that enhances the lives of those around us. When we let go of the need to constantly assert our importance, we discover the profound joy of connection, the richness of perspective, and the strength that comes from serving a higher purpose. Thinking less about ourselves doesn't mean we diminish our worth. Instead, it means we expand our capacity to grow, to love, and to live authentically. In doing so, we align ourselves with a deeper truth. Life is not about being at the center, but about finding our place in the whole. By stepping out of the narrow confines of self-centeredness, we open ourselves to a life of meaning, purpose, and genuine fulfillment.